If there are any cohort of individuals to bet on, our thesis is that it's going to be the veteran leaders. There's only one reason a company ever fails, and that's because the founder or the team quits. So I'm not necessarily looking for incredibly complex financial models. What I'm looking for is a deep understanding of a go-to-market strategy that can add as a validator to their model. For first-time founders, if you're just diving into the deep end and you've never done this thing before, you can't expect to just be good at entrepreneurship.
Okay, welcome back to Seed Money. Today we have a great guest, Mike Sherbakov. The co-founder and general partner at the Veteran Fund, which is amazing. I'm excited to hear more about that. A former Marine, and I gotta say, Mike, thank you, obviously, for your service. And I'm excited to see and draw some of the parallels between military service and entrepreneurship, because I think there's got to be a lot of parallels to the craziness and dedication required. So I love everything you're doing there. I think it's incredible. He's a founder. He's been the managing director of Southern California's Founder Institute, which is the world's largest startup accelerator, which I didn't even realize. And he's taken several business ventures from zero to exit, scaled his organization to thousands of investor members, hundreds of portfolio companies. He guest lectures at Stanford. And as I said, he was a Marine, and I'm sure could still kick some butt. Currently lives in Austin. Mike, welcome. So good to have you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so happy to be here. And we were just chatting before we pressed record that it's, we met over a decade ago, maybe even longer. So it's nice to reconnect here and love everything you're doing. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. Yeah, it is fun. I think San Diego had such a great startup community, and I actually miss that quite a bit. And it's funny how you make so many connections in the process of just starting a company and raising money. You're constantly networking, and you don't even realize all these connections you've built sometimes. It's actually one of the really cool parts of, I think, that whole process. So anyway, yeah, I think it's really fun to reconnect, and I do miss that community in San Diego. Santa Barbara's not quite as there in the startup space, but you're in Austin now. How's it down there?
Spending more time here. I still consider San Diego home base. But yeah, a lot more time in Austin, a lot more time in San Francisco, which is where I grew up, the Bay Area there, and then New York, Miami. I'm kind of doing quite a bit of travel on behalf of the firm. And it's nice to see the different startup ecosystems that exist in all these cities. But I think Austin has done a unique, job in what Capital Factory has done here. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, no, I am. It sounds incredible.
Yeah, they've completely transformed this city from a tech perspective.
That's amazing. Crazy. So tell us a little bit about the Veteran Fund, because I think you say it's basically in critical technology, which is amazing, and just a little bit that I read. Tell us a little bit more about that and how you started and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it ties in actually really well to, my military service. Is the very quick abbreviated version is you grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in the Bay Area. Oldest sister went to Stanford. The next sister after that got her doctorate in neuroscience. Little brother went to Berkeley. So our whole family, that was the trajectory. And yet for me, 9/11 hit really close to home. I remember exactly where I was, when I heard about what happened. And it was this interesting kind of convergence of events where at the end of high school, I decided instead of going that path that my siblings did, I was going to join the military. So spent 5 years on active duty. And again, we can kind of talk about, after that, but ended up doing my undergrad after the Marines, started my first business, fell in love with entrepreneurship, and took me a while. I'm sure that as many you and your guests have talked about on the show, lessons learned along the way, realized I wanted to support those founders, right? That had gone through a similar journey, that served in the military, that wanted to start a business. And so ended up launching the accelerator. And naturally, as companies mature, they need funding. Came up with this idea with my three partners. That's myself, Ryan Micheletti, Justin Ahama, and Lisa Song Sutton, who are amazing. They're my best friends. we came together and we started the firm, the Veteran Fund. And our whole thesis to tie it all together is those folks that have raised their right hand, that have served our country, embody these very important qualities of leadership, resilience, and purpose. And for us, especially at the stage at which we invest, which is early, right? We come in at the pre-seed and seed. We invest 500K up to 1.5 million. At that stage, of course, every investor is looking at team, product, market, product velocity, all these things, but really you're betting on the people. And if there are any cohort of individuals to bet on, our thesis is that it's going to be the veteran leaders, right? They've built a great team around them. They have deep domain expertise. And here we are, right? 3 years later, we have 21 portfolio companies. The fund is performing extremely well. So we've essentially validated our thesis, right? Because this was a proof of concept idea. And yeah, we're kind of off to the races. So we oversubscribed our fund 1. We're going to be back out to market for $100 million fund 2 later this year. And I'm just really proud of our portfolio companies. I'm proud of the community we've built. We have folks that are 4-star generals in the military that joined as LPs in the fund, all the way to folks like Deepak Chopra in the mindfulness world, to the owner of the Kraft, or the Kraft family, the owner of the New England Patriots. So we've brought along a really unique group of individuals and family offices that also believe in our mission. And now, more than an idea, we can point to it and say, hey, this is a validated thesis, and it's a really good idea to invest in these founders and these types of companies.
That is incredible. Yeah, I agree. You are really betting on the founder at that early stage. And yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, it requires discipline, resilience, like you said, focus, dedication, all these same qualities that you either have to have or I'm sure develop being in the military. And I think too, I can only imagine that I have no family in the military, so I've never really been close to it, but I can only imagine when you get out, it's similar to even entrepreneurship in the sense that you're sitting there going, I don't even know what I'm good at anymore. Like what do I do next? What am I good at? So for you guys to support that and lean into the skills they do have, I think is incredible. What are some of the, I think there's the obvious ones of resilience and stuff like that, but what are some of the traits that you do see that, have proven your concept where you're like, yes, this does translate to entrepreneurship?
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, and I'm curious to know if you agree with this, there's only one reason a company ever fails, and that's because the founder or the team quits. Like, yes, you can have cash flow issues, you may have customer issue, there are all kinds of technical challenges and sales challenges and all these things. But at the end of the day, at some point, the decision is made, right, by the founder of the team that we're done. It's time. And I would argue that, if there, again, are any archetype of founders that are going to have a mission in mind and say, we are going to accomplish that mission no matter what, it is that group of veterans, someone that's served in the military that understands essentially that this is a no-fail mission. We're out there, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to find a way to make it happen. Like my time in the Marines, one of the things we learned early on was adapt and overcome. And I'm sure, again, I know you as an entrepreneur, I like to ask entrepreneurs, raise your hand if, life and business has gone completely according to plan. All the projections, all the financial models, everything that you modeled out, did it ever go perfect? Are you kidding? Never seen such a thing, never will be such a thing. And so knowing that, the conditions change, variables are introduced all the time to us, as long as you're able to adapt and overcome as a founder, as a team, that to me is a recipe for success. So I could list out a number of qualities and characteristics and what we look for, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to, do they have a deep why and a deep sense of purpose into what they're building and why they're doing it? And are they incredibly mission-driven founders that essentially look at this like a no-fail mission? And I want to clarify one thing too, is we're in the world of venture. We are not expecting 100% of our companies, to become these unicorns and decacorns. We understand the failure rate that comes along with early stage companies. And we're okay with that. We're okay with a founder at some point saying, you know what, having the honest conversation with us, I think it's, we've given this our best shot. It's time for us to stop and pursue something else. Totally understandable. We'll even write a check into their next company, but it's more so like, are they giving it absolutely everything they got? And have they until they get to a point where they realize, yeah, there's really something unique here that we're going to take it where it needs to go. Or I think it's time to, pack up shop and pursue another adventure.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think you had mentioned kind of before today that not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about your kind of philosophy there, or thought process.
Yeah, look, the idea of being a founder and just entrepreneurship in general is very kind of glamorized. I think, with all these Netflix shows and everyone loves this idea of being a founder. And then you get into it, right? And you and I have both been there. And it is hard AF. In fact, in most cases, you're giving up kind of the comfort and security of, of a job and 40 hours a week for like a total uncertain outcome and like 80-hour weeks, at times. And that is kind of crazy. It takes a certain level of like being delusional to think that, you're going to create something that no one else has done. And again, it seems very exciting at the beginning. And this is why, to me, the sense of like the vision and mission is very important. So now let me answer the question more directly of like, do I think everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur or founder? Absolutely not. And I've found one of the best ways to kind of weed out those that are serious and those that aren't is something like the accelerator program that you mentioned in my bio, right? I split my time 80-20. 80% running the venture capital firm. The other 20% is running the Founder Institute program for Southern California, which is, again, the world's largest startup accelerator. And the very kind of, for those that aren't familiar with the startup accelerator model, you can think of like Y Combinator, Techstars, 500 Startups. We're free, all of those. Those are more seed stage accelerators. This is very early in helping founders go from 0 to 1, call it ideation MVP. And what I love about this is it's a 13-week program, all virtual, right? We're matching them up with mentors. We're giving them, deliverables, 30 hours of company building work every week. Sometimes they're getting epic sprints, which are, an additional 10, 20, 30 hours a week. And what it's really doing is it's testing them to see two things. Number one, are they kind of founder material? Are they the founder to take this company where it needs to go? Because you'll realize very quickly if you're not. If you're having to dedicate 60 hours a week and you wake up and you go, I don't think I want to do this anymore, or there's not a deep sense of mission or vision behind it, you're going to quit. And that is a perfectly acceptable outcome. If they wake up on week 2 or 3 and realize, whoa, this is hard, I don't want to do it, awesome. Like you've saved yourself years of your life and, a lot of money and time and energy and you've realized that in 2 weeks. The other outcome is if, there's a business they're pursuing that just doesn't really make sense. Like we like to say, there's not a there. And again, I'd rather want them to discover that in the first few weeks or in this 13-week program, rather than years, of time, energy, capital, all dedicated towards building something where there's never even like a demand signal. There aren't even customers for the solution. And so to me, that kind of, you need some kind of filter mechanism like that. You need to go through some boot camp version to really test those two things. Are you, founder or entrepreneur material? And 2, is there really a business here? And I think the sooner you figure that out, the better. I'm curious, would you agree with something like that?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And I think had I done something like that, I think I could have learned a lot more, a lot faster. You know what I mean? So I think there's a huge advantage to those programs, obviously. Quickly, I think, it's funny. I came across an email the other day, old email address, hadn't been in it for probably like a few years, had to find an email from like 2009. And I'd come across this email I was emailing someone for advice. I'd met with him the day before. This was in 2008. And I read my response that said, "Thank you so much, for your advice. Despite the economic conditions, I can't give up yet." And I was like, oh my gosh, you're just deliriously optimistic. Like, this is 2008. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm out there determined to do it. So I think you do, like, thank God we do have some of that, like, just, enthusiasm for whatever we're doing, because you wouldn't push through, and we need all these companies to, make the world go round. So I think that I just had to laugh about that. But I agree with you. I think that, yeah, those accelerators are extremely valuable. The other thing I want to mention that I think you brought up is where entrepreneurs do hit a point of where it's either, I can't take it any further. The product market fit isn't there, under resourced, whatever it is, whatever the reason. For me, it was woke up and go, wow, my why isn't strong anymore 10 years later, right? I have to make a change. But the nice thing about what you said with your expectations are real as a professional investor. Like, the reason I'm so thankful I didn't take my family's money, my grandmother mortgaging her house, something like that, because even though you're so sure it's going to work as an entrepreneur, there are so many factors involved. And working with professional investors, there's a realistic lens of what you're doing, and you're accounting for some failures. So, a lot, right? Yeah, a lot. Yeah. So I think that's just a note to people in that really, really early stage. Like, the more you can target and work with professional investors, one, you're going to get better advice, you're going to get better traction. Do an accelerator, something like that, where you can get, more filter through your business idea. But I think, yeah, it's all a reason to not, take money from people who can't afford it and don't know what they're getting into. I think that's a big, important thing.
Yeah. And just so everyone understands kind of how venture math works and, the power law in ventures, we understand that it'll be one or two companies in our portfolio per fund that return the entire fund. That means out of 25 companies to invest in, the math historically says one or two companies will return the entire fund and pay back our limited partners, our investors in the fund. And then we'll have some that are, the 5, 10x markups. We'll have some that are just break even. And then the majority of the companies fail. And again, we understand that. I kind of wish that wasn't true, because every single time we wouldn't make an investment. Obviously, that's, writing at $500,000, $1 million to someone is a large amount of money. And we wouldn't be writing that thinking they're going to fail, but it's just the way historically that these things play out. Again, we are betting on the founders. We're betting on the team. We're betting on a product that we believe needs to exist in the world, a big enough market. And so, there's conviction behind every single investment we make. And for context, we looked at 5,000 companies, more than that now, to make the 21 investments we did. So we say no, 99% of the time. But again, even with all that said, we understand failure is absolutely part of this journey.
Yep, makes sense. A question I get a lot, and I think this happens for a lot of founders, it was the case for me. You have this idea, you have the passion. A lot of people have a product background. They don't necessarily have a finance background. And doing financial projections can be extremely challenging, and how to show a compelling growth story while still being realistic. Can you talk a little bit about what you look for when you're evaluating companies from a financial projection standpoint, and any tips for founders as they're putting those together, presenting, especially to a bigger, fund like you guys have?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is, at the end of the day, projections are just projections. As we kind of talked about at the very beginning, raise your hand if you've ever hit projections exactly to a T. We understand that as professional investors as well. So I'd say you can model things out all you want. At the end of the day, you number one, you have to be able to justify how you back into those numbers. And second, we again know that things will always change. So that's the caveat. To answer the question more directly of what do we look for? How do founders think about it? It definitely depends on the industry and the kinds of things we look for. Every firm has a different, what they call a fund mandate or investment thesis. For us at the seed stage at which we invest, it's very different if we're looking at B2B SaaS compared to, a deep tech company, or one that's just targeting the government and we're helping them with commercial traction. I mean, our investments in our current portfolio range from space tech. We have 2 space companies to 4 defense companies to kind of then your standard fintech. We don't do a lot of consumer. We'll do some consumers if there's also like a B2B2C kind of component to it. So it's hard to answer like directly what we look for, but I'd say like if we want to go ballpark at the seed stage, we're probably looking for like $1 million in ARR as kind of an entry point. But again, that varies so much because at the end of the day, we want to see a strong demand signal. Part of our due diligence process after we get to like the later stages of diligence is talking to customers. And so, yeah, again, if they're a B2B SaaS company, we'll talk to those customers and understand, like what they're like, how they onboarded, like how they're using the product. Do they plan on staying on? Like how does this expand as their team expands? To some of the other companies where we're doing space, we're looking at their contracts. So we're kind of underwriting in our diligence process. What do we think that they can land from a government contract perspective? So I wish I had like a more direct answer for you, but because we invest across these 14 critical technology areas, the metrics are going to be a little bit different. What I will say is there's a great resource on the Founder Institute website. It's fi.co/benchmarks. And every quarter it updates with what the kind of industry leading benchmarks are for each stage of funding. So at pre-seed, if you're an e-com company, a marketplace company, B2B SaaS, what are the metrics that are, across the board, at least for that last quarter in terms of who's getting funding and who's not. Peter Walker, my buddy over at Carta, also does a really great job on the data insights. And so if people aren't following him on LinkedIn, he puts out these awesome charts of like, here's what happened last quarter and like median, MRR and ARR for these types of companies and this industry based on what's getting funded across these sectors.
Oh, that's great. We'll put that down below. In terms of, the actual projections they're submitting, because I think I've been coming across this where people will have projections on a deck, very loose, and then I'll say, where's your backup? And they're like, oh, and it's just a very loose Excel sheet, right? And I think to your point, maybe it doesn't have to be this crazy model because it's all going to change, but there's also a level of you want to have thought through all the details to some degree. So what level of a model are you looking for? Like, do you expect at that point they have a CFO or somebody they've contracted with to build them some sort of model? Or, is it pretty loose projections are okay if the product is strong enough? And I know there's a million different, in-betweens, but just any thoughts or advice on how detailed of a model they need to have and, the best way to get that? I know I ended up paying a lot of money to get a financial model that I could, work off of. And of course it changed and we tweaked it 9 million times, but it was helpful to have that. And it made me feel like I had something professional to at least present,
Yeah, of course. I think, again, at the stage at which we invest, we typically don't see full-time CFOs. We'll see kind of fractional outsourced CFOs. Maybe after we invest, they're bringing someone on more full-time, especially if they have, large accounts and it's kind of more complex financial accounting. But for the most part, I would say there's someone on the team as an advisor that has some kind of finance experience. And so they're able to create something that's good enough. To your point, I think you said the key word, which is like thoughtfulness. If I in their deck see a chart that's like the perfect hockey stick curve or perfect 45 degree, like we are growing by, this percentage every single year. And I look again to that Excel sheet that you mentioned and look deeper into the numbers, and it's just they've plugged it in a very simple formula and that extrapolates over the next 5 years. And that's how they get to, whatever, 100 million in revenue. That to me shows that there is no thoughtfulness there. So I want to understand whatever numbers they have. And it really doesn't, like, we've definitely invested when it's just been a simple Excel model. So I'm not necessarily looking for incredibly complex financial models. What I'm looking for is a deep understanding of a go-to-market strategy that it can add as a validator to their model. So as an example, if we're looking at like an ed tech platform and they're in 5 states right now, and they say, okay, we're planning to roll out into 5 more states in this next year, then 10 states. And we already have, and we've done the research to understand as we roll out into these states, this is how many, new accounts this will open for us. So again, I know I'm being very general with this because we look at so many different industries, but I don't want it to be a simple formula that they plug in that shows consistent growth month over month, year over year, because that is never realistic. But if there's a thoughtfulness into kind of their land and expand or their go-to-market strategy, and that can plug into the model to validate the projections they have, that makes a lot more sense for us.
Yeah, that's great advice. The go-to-market strategy, the growth strategy reflected, which is kind of obvious, but I think, to your point, that's not always the case. So just remembering tying those two together is important. Shifting gears a little bit, tell us how you went from the Marines into your first company and kind of what that experience was like.
Yeah, so I got out of the Marines. My last duty station was at Camp Pendleton in San Diego. And I loved San Diego. It's just still one of my favorite places in the world. It's just kind of this intersection of all, cool things of lifestyle and business and great weather almost all the time. Except people don't realize this. They come to San Diego because they've heard great things about it. And they come in May and June. And we have this, May, gray, June gloom. It's a very real thing. People are like, wait, I thought, yeah. But then we also have the summer days in January where we're surfing. And that's awesome. So yeah, decide I want to stay in San Diego. Again, I'm finishing my undergrad. I studied kinesiology and psychology. And as I was getting ready to graduate, I also knew I kind of was looking at the options, and I've had a passion for entrepreneurship. I knew I wasn't just going to go. And again, I had seen my older sister do this, which she went to Bain Capital and she was kind of doing the whole corporate thing. And I realized like, that's not my world. That's, I think, one of the reasons I left the military, actually, even though I had what are called meritorious promotions and I did very well in the Marines, but I felt really limited. I kept trying to introduce new strategies to either save our shop a lot of money or do something much more efficiently. And that was just turned down kind of time and time again because I was a certain rank and someone that was higher ranking would tell me, no, we're not doing that. And there was no logical reason for that other than, the power dynamic. And so I had kind of an adverse reaction to that, knowing I didn't want to be in a dynamic where I wasn't rewarded for my performance or for the work that I put in. And to me, entrepreneurship is the ultimate example. And capitalism. This is why I know people talk about the negative impacts of capitalism, but I think only in America can you create something. And if it's valuable enough for other people, by definition, that's what business is. You're bringing some sort of value to a customer that's paying you X amount of dollars. And therefore you get to, build a great company that way because people see value in it. And there's no ceiling to it. That's exciting to me. And so I knew these things. I was kind of listening to, different resources on entrepreneurship. I was reading a bunch of books and realized, okay, let me start my first business. And the first business I started was called HMS Fitness. So my son's name is Holden Michael Sherbakov. And then I also, because I studied kinesiology and psychology, I like this connection between mind and body. So HMS was my son's initials, but also stood for heart, mind, soul. And because I didn't have any business experience, I needed a plug and play model. How can I learn it? Almost like this accelerator that I run now to help folks start. And at the time, there was a company called Fit Body Bootcamp. They're still around, but it's a franchise model. And this is back in the day where they would send you DVDs. And again, coming from the Marines, I was very good at follow instructions. So they sent me this DVD set, and it was all about, setting up these private and semi-private personal training facilities. And so now they have them, franchise. They probably have hundreds, thousands across the country, and I think internationally as well. But this is at the time where you didn't have to use their name. So they just kind of gave you the blueprint for it. And so, kind of hit the pavement. The first location that I started was in the Carmel Valley Rec Center, right next to the Del Mar Highlands there, if you know that area at all. And they have a very specific model where you kind of go door to door and you encourage the owners to come for free, and then they get their staff to come. So it built up a business pretty quickly. the thing is too, I love the quote of when you figure out when your why becomes big enough, you figure out your how. And my why was I just finished college. I want to live in San Diego. I have my son to support, and there's a very big why. I'm going to make this work. And so ended up scaling that pretty quickly. And in that type of model, the value is in the clientele that you end up getting on, and everyone that's on this like auto paid membership. So ended up scaling that to a second and a third and a fourth location, selling that to the first person I ever hired. Because similar, like you said, you woke up 10 years after doing something and realized I don't have the same kind of passion and vision for this. I realized, okay, this was a good start into entrepreneurship, but I'm kind of ready for the next thing. And the second company, and I'll just kind of breeze very quickly through this, was a company called Karuna Towels. And I had finished reading a book called Start Something That Matters by Blake Mycoskie, the founder of Tom's Shoes. And I really loved this 1-for-1 model. I was actually doing yoga teacher training at the time, which is a very random thing, but it was something I was really interested in. And I saw when you go into the studios at Core Power or wherever you were, they sold these yoga towels that go over the mat when you do hot yoga, but it was Yogi Toes and Manduka, and they were just very expensive, and they were like okay quality, but not great. And so, worked with a bunch of manufacturers, ended up creating this yoga towel line that were anti-slip, antibacterial, antimicrobial. They had a cool, phrase around the outer edge, a better practice, a better world. And then we partnered with the Against Malaria Foundation because this is before the 1-for-1 model got outplayed. But we, for every towel we sold, we provided a bed net to a family in Africa through the Against Malaria Foundation. So this is kind of my entry point into social entrepreneurship. And so, scaled that, got into a bunch of yoga studios, from San Diego, Orange County, LA, started like building that. And then I was approached by a friend, David Metzler, who I'm not sure. Do you know David Metzler?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It sounds familiar, but I can't know.
He started a company called, it was Fitness Network at the time, and then it became Wildfire. And so then that was the company that we kind of from the ground up scaled, raised a good amount of venture capital from Guggenheim Group. It was the ClassPass model, one membership, access to a bunch of studios. But because of what I had done previously with those two companies, HMS Fitness and Karuna Towels, I already had the relationships with a lot of these folks. So we were able to onboard, a number of studios very quickly. That company ultimately failed and learned a lot along the way, as you probably know. Like sometimes you learn, not sometimes, I feel like more often than not, you learn from the failures much more than the wins of like, what does it mean to raise outside capital? And what does it mean to have incredibly high burn in like $300,000-$400,000 a month in what we owe to studios because our members were going to these places. So that was a really kind of interesting, kick-started to like what it's like to raise outside funding. That was the first time I took outside capital. The previous two companies I just bootstrapped. And then the last one that I joined pretty early on was a company called Nourish Me, which was doing micellized curcumin. Again, all health and wellness related. That company ended up being publicly traded via reverse merger. And, I was doing angel investments along the way, kind of taking some chips off the table, and realized also like, hey, I love this founder thing, but as I'm making these angel investments and helping startups at the early stages, I really love the investing part of that. So it was after Nourish Me that I transitioned to starting the accelerator and then kind of investing full time. So that's a very kind of condensed version, but I hope it kind of shows the trajectory there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think too, you were very smart in the beginning to recognize, I'm going to use someone else's blueprint. I think that's one thing, ideas are great, but and that's something I really believe in is what is your goal with entrepreneurship, and make sure it aligns with kind of what you're doing, because you can have a great idea, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to align with like your lifestyle goal, maybe you're not at a point you want to work 80 hours a week. You know what I mean? And not saying even given the blueprint that you don't have to put in extra hours, but there are businesses you can start and dip your toe into entrepreneurship that might not be as challenging as just like starting a product from scratch, with inventory and having to go out and raise money and all of that. So I think that's really smart. And there's so many options and opportunities these days. I feel like, also there's just unlimited ways of starting something or getting involved in something. So I think that was a smart move you made in the beginning. Very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think it's really important. I'd say for first-time founders, if you're just diving into the deep end and you've never done this thing before, you can't expect to just be good at entrepreneurship. I think you really kind of have to get your reps in, just like I think as investors as well. Like I wanted to make sure I was good at deploying my own capital as an angel investor before I ever took anyone else's. And so I think whether, it's the accelerator model you follow, whether it's getting a mentor that's done it before that you're checking in with regularly, because I really do feel like even though I had the blueprint in many ways, not just for HMS Fitness or, a book for this Karuna Towels with social entrepreneurship, I learned so many lessons the hard way and wasted so much time and money that I really I see the accelerator that, we run now. And I say, really, it's like 3 months. It's taking 10 years. What took me 10 years to learn condensed to 3 months. And I think to your point, you're spot on where if you can follow some kind of model, be it, a course, an accelerator, a person, a blueprint of some sort that is going to save you so much time and money, just make sure that it's someone that's actually done it before, a proven model, because there are a lot of resources out there that are giving really bad information. The quick, way to tell if something is bad information is if it's costing you a lot of money up front.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the things that's great about the Founders Institute. I mentored there for a couple of years when I first moved up to Santa Barbara and worked with a few really cool companies where I was just, totally out of the realm of stuff I normally am interested in, but I got just so into what they were doing. It was really cool. But, you guys pair people up with mentors that kind of align in some way, shape, or form, right? So you've got all these mentors and then they join and they basically get paired up with people. So it's hard to find people who can mentor you. So even just that in itself is incredible, right? I mean, tell us a little bit about that process. If somebody wants to, apply for the Founders Institute right now, what does that look like? What are the chances of getting in and all that good stuff?
Yeah, again, it's a little bit different than like a Y Combinator, which is, 1 out of every 10,000 applicants gets accepted. Techstars is probably 1 out of 1,000. 500 startups is probably 1 out of 500. And then Founder Institute is, because it's so early and it's in this, most founders coming through are in, again, going from ideation to MVP, 0 to 1, the acceptance rate is much higher. But it's actually not about getting accepted because the model is different than those other accelerators. The other accelerators, they'll start with a cohort of 12, 20, 100 founders, and they go all the way through from start to finish. Founder Institute, like the current cohort that we are in, we're coming down to our last few weeks of our spring cohort. We started this one with 105 founders and we are at 20. And so it's an attrition model, again, because every week we start with vision and mission, to your point. You have to know, when you wake up on a hard day, why are you building what you're building? And as you go through every week, there's a big red button in your dashboard that says drop out. And there's absolutely nothing wrong. Again, that is a perfectly good outcome for many founders to realize, I'm not the founder to do this. This isn't the business that I want to build. So that's the model. So again, it's not graduating every single person. It's realizing if they're the founder and if this is the business to do it. But yeah, for those that are going through the program, I brought in all of my, my personal mentors, advisors, investors, everyone I co-invest with. I brought them. We have 265 mentors in the chapter that I run. And they get paired up. They host office hours, they join sessions. And so the founders are meeting mentors every single week, sometimes several times a week. and just deciding and learning from them, but also hopefully building relationships so that when they graduate the program, if there's a strong kind of values alignment, they can bring them on as investors or advisors or, longer term mentors. So the website's super simple, fi.co. And so whoever is listening to this, if they go to that, it's geolocated. So if you're in Florida, you may go to the Florida chapter, or Texas, the Texas chapter, or San Francisco, there's a Bay Area program. So it's a distributed model. And yeah, folks, but you can, because it's almost all programs after COVID are virtual, maybe with the exception of Texas that does in person. Folks can decide which cohort they want to join. But yeah, you fill out an intake form. It gives you results for your entrepreneur DNA assessment, because over now 8,000 companies have graduated from the program over the last 12 years. They can model and correlate the qualities you have based on this DNA test you take early on to successful outcomes. Right. And we have companies like Udemy and Realty Mogul and Fight Camp, these unicorns that have been built through Founder Institute. And you can kind of track, what qualities did the founders have in the team that led to this outcome or to this outcome? And so it's kind of nice. You get a sense of who you are pretty early on, and some really kind of valuable psychographic insights before you even start the program.
That is cool. Very cool. Yeah. What a great program. It's amazing. I think, anything like that can be very helpful. I ended up doing my MBA, which was a very, very expensive way to get the similar results. So yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, man, you are a wealth of knowledge. What are your goals for the next couple of years? What are you working towards?
Yeah, I professionally, I'm really excited for us. We're in this pre-marketing phase before we launch our $100 million fund too. And it's really kind of crazy if you would have told me, 5 years ago that, hey, you'd be going after $100 million, investing in companies you really care about with veterans on the leadership team. Like, well, so I'm very grateful for that. And it comes out of the people that we get to do this alongside every day, from our portfolio companies to our LPs. I'm very, very grateful for. So I'd say professionally, that's my big goal, and that's what's on the horizon. Personally, I started paragliding lessons in San Diego at Torrey Pines there. And so I just finished my 14th solo flight, and it takes about 30 to get it's called a P2 certification. And so I'm very excited, although I'm in Texas right now, I'm excited to get back to San Diego and finish that training, because there's something really special about flying on a paraglider. I grew up surfing. And so to me, if surfing is riding the energy of the water, to me, paragliding is riding the energy of, the air and nature. And it's really, really special. So yeah, those are probably the two big things.
Wow. Paragliding is where it's like the parachute and you're sitting, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And hang gliding, you're laying down. Oh, how fun. That's amazing. Yeah. I remember seeing them in Torrey Pines there. A lot of people go off the cliffs here in Santa Barbara too. And it looks like a lot of fun.
Once I get my certification, that's the cool thing, is I can go, when I come visit you in Santa Barbara, I just bring it with me, and, I run off the cliff.
Is amazing. How fun. I love it. That's great. What a fun new thing. I didn't realize you needed a certification. I guess it makes sense. I just hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah. And it's quite, I thought it's not like a weekend or a month. I mean, it takes time, and the conditions have to be right. Torrey Pines generally has good conditions, because for those that have been, it kind of, if you get a good onshore wind because of the cliffs, it creates a really good lift, and you do what's called soaring, and you fly, and you gain altitude and you land back on top. But yeah, it's a really fun experience.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool too, because a lot of people get into flying airplanes, but doing something like that, so much, just the peaceful factor has got to be next level, just floating, quiet.
And there are videos of people, this is the moment I can't wait for. There are videos of people paragliding in the mountains, and bald eagles will come up next to them and just fly alongside them. In fact, when you get really good, I'm not at this level, but when you start flying kind of out in the wild, you actually look for thermals, right? and thermals are the things that give you lift. And one of the ways, in addition to looking at the topography and the terrain, to look for thermals is if you see birds circling. So it is not uncommon to see birds, because they understand nature and energy and thermals, to kind of follow the birds, and then you get in a thermal, and like all my instructors will tell me they thermal with birds all the time. And I can't wait for that.
That is very cool. That's amazing. Love it. Neat. Yeah, nature, connecting to nature is important. And I think especially as busy entrepreneurs, getting that peaceful downtime is more and more critical. I learned that lesson very late also. Oh, wow. Amazing. Anything else you want to share or advice you have?
Just grateful for you. Thank you for doing this. I think, I imagine one of the big reasons you do this is because it's the send the elevator back down model. It's like learn from others, share wisdom, so that a lot of folks don't have to make the same mistakes, or it doesn't take them 10 years to what could be done in a few months. So thanks for what you're doing. And I'll maybe leave everyone with my favorite quote. I'm big on quotes. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, "What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say." And I found this to be very true just in entrepreneurship in general, is a lot of people like talking about ideas, right? And I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, and it's great. Like that's a good start. But to me, it's the whole idea that actions speak louder than words. Again, what you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. And I think that's personally and professionally, that's what I look for. I look for people who are doing it. I understand and I learn about who they are and their values and what they're building by what they're doing, not by what they're saying.
Yeah, I love that. I think to what you mentioned, one of the reasons why I am doing this is I do feel like there was this, and 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was a little bit of a different startup environment, but it can be so intimidating and feel like everybody else is like out there and moving and shaking and, doing all this stuff. And there's so many quiet doers who are just trying to figure it out, have their head down, doing their thing. And you don't have to be that stereotypical, like just, crazy mover and shaker to be a successful entrepreneur or to, bring your product to life. So I think that's very cool. What a great quote. I love that. One last question for you I have to ask is did your son get into entrepreneurship, or what's he doing? Because I'm always so curious, like, to have you as a dad doing all this cool stuff. Did it rub off on him at all, or?
Yeah, the answer is TBD. He is studying entrepreneurship at San Diego State University, and he's finishing his sophomore year right now. And so we will see. I'm hoping he pursues entrepreneurship in some form, but also it's just a very different environment right now. How relevant is the traditional college experience? And with the advent of AI and how kind of ubiquitous we have all these LLMs and these interesting AI models, like how does that affect, the entrepreneurship environment and just the job, opportunities that are available to him when he graduates? I'm so curious because it's a very different world than when you and I were first starting, decades ago.
Totally. Yeah. I have an 8-year-old and we're constantly just like, trying to put him in the environment where he's going to learn to think outside the box, because I don't even know if college will make sense, at all in 10 years. And if it does, what program? So I'm with you there. I think it's really interesting. That's cool. He's doing the program. They have a great program too, SDSU, or they used to. I'm sure it's gotten better.
And I'm sure they have a Zip Launchpad as well. And the Techstars, I don't know if you know this, actually, Techstars came to San Diego and is now Techstars powered by SDSU. So they definitely, even since you've left, I would say the startup ecosystem in San Diego is become a little more galvanized, where instead of like disparate silos, now they're, coming together and talking more and sharing deals, and more venture capital is coming in. And I know we're about to wrap, but one interesting note on the whole like GPT AI thing is my son was telling me when he was going in high school, they were banned. They couldn't use AI to help write them to help with their papers. And interestingly, my brother actually works at OpenAI. He's been there for 5 years. And so he was telling me the incredible, like the steep drop off that happens at the end of school years for their usage. Do you know that? It's like a 30 to 40% drop in May and June as soon as the school semester is over, which tells you quite a bit. But interestingly, so if it was banned in high school, he wasn't allowed to use it in his college classrooms. They actually encourage them to use it because they realize it's inevitable. It's just about how they use it, right? So yeah, it can get you 80% of the way there, but then how do you apply critical thinking and, apply the human element to the last 20% of it? So the fact that it's made its way into the curriculum and teachers are embracing it more, this is why I have no idea what it'll look like, because imagine what happens when students like don't have to write the types of papers and the late nights where how many late nights did you and I have, like, especially for your MBA?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Writing behind a computer. And now, it's kind of done for you. So it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out.
That is crazy. Very cool. Well, thank you again, Mike. So great connecting again and having you on. And it's so excited for you and all the entrepreneurs you're helping out there and veterans. It's an amazing program. So very cool. Congrats on everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. We'll talk to you soon.